What I want you guys to do is try to think of that moment in your life. Some of you may not be old enough to actually participate here, but try to think to that moment in your life where you were officially on your own. You guys remember that? There was no one to pay the bills but you. Like, food didn't magically just appear in your refrigerator and in your pantry. You were out on your own, away from mom and dad, away from a caregiver. It was all on you to make life happen. Can you remember that moment in your life? Pretty big moment for all of us, right? I remember I was living in San Jose, California, capital of the Silicon Valley, right? It's the hub of the tech industry in the United States. What does that all mean? It just means it's a really expensive place to live. And that's where I was living. I had just graduated college. I was engaged to be married to this wonderful, beautiful girl named Dana, who everyone thought was great, but they were starting to wonder if they could trust her judgment because she said yes to my proposal, right? I think she won in the end, right? She's got the last laugh. Maybe some of you are like, nah, she didn't. But I'm going to at least tell myself that. And I had found this one-bedroom apartment for us to live in. She was still going to be with mom and dad. I was going to live there for a month and a half until our wedding day. And it was in a relatively okay place, like a relatively nice area of town. It was new construction, to say the least, so it looked nice. We've got a picture of at least the outside of this apartment. I mean, it's got the cool gym, right? It's got the pool. A little side note on the pool. You can't see it, but over where that little blue umbrella is, there was a hot tub, and later on we actually did a few baptisms there for college and career ministry. I'm just going down the path of all the fun memories is what I'm doing right now. But again, pretty nice place to live. But it was just a one-bedroom apartment, and it was sandwiched between a guy who did not know how to just walk. He had to stomp everywhere he went. And so the stomping would make the fixtures in the kitchen just rattle every single time. It's oh my goodness, just walk like a normal human being. And then below, they loved 80s music, and they would just blast 80s music as loud as they possibly could. And so it was just this one-bedroom apartment right there in the middle of just wonderful things. And it cost me, this was 19 years ago, it cost me $1,100 a month for rent. Again, 19 years ago. That was a good deal. That was actually a pretty good bargain for that area. Now, 19 years since, you know how much that same one-bedroom apartment will cost you? $2,505. Yeah, so still a really good deal. Still an amazing deal, right? That's a great place to live. But the place was empty, so it was just me, and I had a desk and a computer because that's what I had from school. We went out and we bought a couch from a family that she used to babysit for. They threw in an entertainment center. You guys remember those entertainment centers where it was made of wood and you put those big giant TVs inside and you put, all for $100, couch, entertainment center. That was pretty cool for $100. And then I bought a dining room table and chair set, which I still feel like I really overpaid for. But my professor said it was a really good deal, even though I'm looking, it was just so out of date even for the time, but it was really well built. They don't build them like this anymore, Jonathan. So anyway, I got one of those, and that was pretty much it. I didn't even have a bed to sleep in because Dana was sleeping in the bed that we were going to eventually have, and it was at her mom and dad. So I'm sleeping on the couch for about a month and a half. I remember this one evening, I'm just sitting in this couch, and I'm looking around at this sparsely furnished apartment, and I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude. There's just this moment where it's I can't believe I get all this. And I can't believe I'm living this life. I'm a college graduate. Small miracle, right, in and of itself with that one. This girl actually has said yes to my wedding proposal. I can't believe this. I got a job. I have a job that is going to pay me $28,000 a year. I felt like a millionaire, right? This is going to be amazing. And I'm just filled with all this gratitude. And it was just this wonderful time of worship where I recognized I have way more than I need. It's not a lot, but it's more than I need and certainly more than I deserve. You ever had one of those moments? Where just looking around, you're my goodness, God, you are so good to me. Last week, we asked, or had you ask a question. The challenge was to ask yourself why. Why do you have so much? And oftentimes we like to focus on what we don't have, but it's important to ask that question, why do we have so much? Because in reality, you probably have way more than you had when you first started, right? Maybe you could play that compare game and you could look at what mom and dad had at this point in their life. And you probably may even have more than mom and dad had. And you certainly can look at the world around you and you know that you can lay claim to way more than most of the population of our planet can lay claim to. And so the question we had you guys ask last week was, why? Why has God given you so much? And one of the things that we've been doing in this series, we're calling it heart disease, and specifically we're dealing with one of 4 enemies of your heart. This month we've been tackling greed. One of the things that we're really doing is we're walking through this parable that Jesus talked about greed. And it's going to give us all kinds of insight into what greed is, the danger of greed, but it's also giving us a solution to the problem of greed. And so what I want to do today as we get started, I want to just read to you the parable, like from beginning to end. We've kind of pieced it together over the last few weeks. I want to just read it in its entirety. And if you're like, oh my goodness, that's really... No, it's one of the smaller parables, so don't worry. We're going to be done in just probably less than a minute. But it starts with a warning. So if you have your Bible, I want to first read the warning, and then we're going to get into the story itself. If you could, Luke chapter 12 is where we're going to be at. And in Luke chapter 12, verse 15, Jesus begins with this warning. He says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of what? There's all kinds. Be watching out for the greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So there's the warning. He says, watch out. He says, it's going to be tempting for you to just focus in on what you don't have. That's the way most of us are. We're like, we don't have. He says, don't do that. Watch out. That's when greed's going to step in, because what greed's going to do is as soon as a blessing comes, you're just focused on what you don't have. So when that blessing comes, you're just going to be like, oh yeah, no, this is meant for me. And Jesus says, maybe not. So be careful. Don't let greed into your heart. And it's at this point, do I still have sound? Okay. It's at this point that he tells the story. Look at verse 16. It says, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Right? This is me right before I'm married, looking around like, oh my goodness, I have so much stuff. Verse 17. He thought to himself, and this is a key question. Key question he asks, and it's a key question we need to ask as well. What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be for whoever stores up things for themselves, but here it is, but is not rich towards God. Now, in these verses, this man doesn't seem to ask the question, why? Why do I have so much? But I think if we pose that question to this individual, the answer is pretty obvious. He would answer, well, the reason I have so much is because I've earned it. I deserve it. And this is what greed always says, right? What does greed always say? Greed says, I owe me. I owe me. I earned it. I worked hard for it. I deserve it. I found it. I took it. I was at the right place at the right time. It's mine. So that's how he answers it. But what about you guys? This past week, the challenge was for you to ask that question as often as you possibly could. So as you were thinking through it, why me? Why do I have so much? I'm just curious, what were some of the thoughts that came into your mind? Why do you have so much? And I think the answer, particularly as we read the parable in its entirety, I think the answers should be pretty obvious. It makes it self-evident in the parable itself. But before we take the path of predictability, why don't we just come up with some of the ideas that maybe we have? Like, why? Why do we have so much? Or at least ideas that certainly the world around us has. Okay, idea number one, why do I have so much? Maybe it's so that you can have enough stored up for your kids, and maybe even for your kids' kids, so that they can have all their needs met even after you're gone. Like, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do. You've been given more so that you can take care of your kids into, even after you're gone. Maybe you've read certain verses. Proverbs chapter 13 is a really good one. It talks about how the good man, I'll actually just quote it to you. This is in Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22. It says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." And so Scripture, even, you got Scripture that back you up. This is a good thing to do with your finances, with your money. But as a pastor, in the many years that I've been a pastor, never once has anyone ever come to me and said, "You know what? All my problems started when my parents didn't give me enough money." Like, never. That has never, ever been a conversation that I've had with people. But we probably all have had experiences. We've probably all maybe at least seen that people find a way to bring out the worst in themselves when money's on the table. You ever had one of those moments? Like, you thought they were cool, but then the money was there, and it's like, yeah, they're not cool at all. And maybe relationships begin to break because, well, they were given something that they didn't actually earn or deserve. And so it can stir all kinds of things in us. So that may be a good reason, but maybe that's not actually what God's calling you to. Maybe another reason. Maybe God provided an abundance for you so that you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. You got so much extra, you don't have to worry about it. Like, God's plan, maybe God's plan is for you to have so much stored up that you can lean and find your peace in whatever financial, resources you've been able to save. Maybe that's the plan. But if you've been around people who have a lot, maybe one of the things that you'll notice, like I've noticed, is those who have more seem to worry more, and they seem to oftentimes have less peace in their life. And isn't it true that peace is actually a fruit of the Spirit? You guys know it. Love, joy, what? Peace. Where does peace come from? Peace comes not necessarily from stuff. Peace comes from surrender. Surrendering our stuff, our life to God, and through the Spirit, we have this peace that transcends all understanding. Right? It guards our hearts and our minds. So maybe that's not the reason. Let's look at another option. Maybe perhaps God has provided extra to elevate your standard of living. Right? Is there anything wrong with buying the new version? The upgrade? The nice things? No, not really. So maybe that's the reason. Or maybe it's not about bumping up your standard of living. Maybe it's about keeping pace with your standard of living. I think this is where most Americans find themselves. Like, what is our goal? Our desire is that we have an income that will at least keep pace with our standard of living. The problem is there's things called credit cards, and you guys know what credit cards do. They allow you to have a much greater standard of living that oftentimes will outpace your income. You've seen it. Maybe you've experienced it. Maybe you're there right now. And what you end up doing is you create this artificial financial pressure that just is a burden on your shoulders every single month. And even when I say that word artificial, you might be like, it's not artificial. No. There's pressure. There's some serious financial pressure in my life. Yeah, I get it. Because you have to pay the bill. You have to pay the bill because you signed the contract for that cable. And so you need to see your program. And some of you are like, cable, man, we stream. This is 21st century streaming. I save a lot of money on streaming. Sure, fantastic. But how many of you may have not just one streaming service, but you have multiple streaming services? One gives you hundreds of shows, all the programming that you probably need, and you would probably be saving a lot of money, but you've got like 5 streaming. You don't need them all. Well, I kind of do because that show's on that one and that one's, I got to have them all, right? Then you're basically paying a cable bill, right? So you are creating this pressure, and maybe one of the ways to alleviate that pressure is just to dial back on your standard of living. I know, I'm stepping on some toes, and that's not what I mean to do. But maybe another reason why God has provided you with extra is so that you can retire early. This is the goal of so many people's lives. Maybe we can retire early, and it's not necessarily a bad goal. In fact, that's the goal of the landowner, isn't it? What does he say? Oh my goodness, I have so much stuff. Guess what I get to do? I get to retire early. I get to eat, drink, and be merry. There's some folks in our church who have been able to do just this. They've been able to retire relatively early. And like this individual, they had to ask themselves a question. They asked themselves the question, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I have extra time now. I have extra finances now. What am I going to do. And what's really neat about these individuals is they had the maturity to realize that maybe it wasn't just for them to, head off to Florida and put their life away. That maybe they are to use that extra time, that extra resource, that extra money to actually be a part of being rich towards God, building His kingdom. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about people like Junior Basham. I'm talking about people like Brad Mitchell, Tony Tide. I'm talking about people like Tom Pichet, who all were able to retire relatively early, but you know what they did? They said, you know what? We want to invest in the kingdom of God. And so here's the thing. Most of you right here today, I think you probably like being here. Maybe you're here for the first time. You're like, I don't like this at all. This is awkward and weird. I can't wait to get out of here. But for those of you who are here on a regular basis, I think you probably like it here. Let me get you in on a little secret here. 75% of the things that you like about our church, right? The fact that we encourage, we equip, we empower you to grow your relationship with God and with others. The things that you like about this church, their fingerprints, those people that I just mentioned, their fingerprints are all over the things that you like. Do you like the fact that it's really hot outside, but it's nice and cool in here? Anyone like, yep, I like it. Some of you are like, it's actually a little too cold in here. That's where some of you are at. That's okay. That means the air conditioning is working. In the winter, it's going to be really cold outside, but it's going to be warm in here. You know whose fingerprints are all over that? Tony Tide's. If you go out to our HVAC units right now with like a duster, you can find literally his fingerprints all over those HVAC units. And if you're a parent and you've ever seen your kids go out over by the playground and they start playing in this weird octagon-shaped thing and they're giggling and they're laughing and there's a ball bouncer and you have no idea what game they're playing, but you're just glad they're having fun. You know whose fingerprints are all over that? Junior Basham's. I mean, granted, I walked out there at one point. I was like, hey, Junior, you're building the Gaga ball court. You need any help? No, you got that covered? Well, give me a holler if you need me. And then all of a sudden it was there. Like it just showed up. Like his fingerprints are all over this. Tom Pichet, you guys like the fact that we've got a security team in place so that you can worship and your kids can be a part of children's programs and you don't have to have this anxiety that maybe someone will come in as a threat. Tom Pichet's fingerprints, Brad's fingerprints are all over that ministry. I don't care if you're talking about the youth ministry. I don't care if you're talking about children's ministry, the outreach, if you're talking about life groups, whatever you talk, their fingerprints are all over. Why? Because they had the maturity of mind to say, you know what? God has given me extra, and I want to be rich towards God. And so we have been able to be blessed because of it. I worked with a guy a number of years ago who did something similar. He was able to retire in his late 40s, and he made a ton of money, and he was really good at it. And then he started doing pastoral work, and he did that for a number of years. And then after a few different things that happened, he was like, you know what, I think maybe God's calling me back into the secular field. And the reason why he did that was because he was really good at making money, and he enjoyed it. And it wasn't to build his barns, bigger barns. It was so that he could actually make a lot of money and then he could invest in the kingdom work taking place throughout the world. These are all individuals who asked that question, that same question in verse 17 that this guy asked. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? But they had this maturity of mind to say, you know what, God, I think you've given me extra, not for the bigger barns, but for the bigger impact in your kingdom. And some of you are at a point where you're noticing that your barns are getting larger than you were anticipating at this point in your life. And this is a wonderful question for you to ask yourself too. Why? Why do I have so much? And I'm confident that as you begin to ask and pray, that God's going to reveal what He's guiding you towards. And the neat thing is that at the end of your life, you may lose everything. Just like this individual lost everything. But you will have actually stored up in the kingdom of heaven, just the way Jesus talks about in Matthew. All right, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. So let's go back to the original problem that we have. It's greed, right? Greed is the problem. And the beautiful thing about greed is not that greed has anything beautiful about it, but there is a solution to this problem. You know, with each one of these enemies of the heart that we've looked at, back in November, it was guilt. There's a remedy for guilt, though. Back in the spring, the problem was anger, but there's a remedy for anger. And we're looking at greed. There's a remedy, just like medicines that the doctor can prescribe will take care of your ailments. Just like aspirin might actually help with a headache, there is an antidote for each one of these enemies. What was it for guilt? Well, you confess. What was it for anger? You forgive. What is it for greed? Well, you probably already know. And you didn't even have to show up for church last week. And some of you, I'm looking around, you weren't even here last week, so you don't even know, but you probably know. What was the remedy? What is the remedy? Your mom has been telling you what the remedy is since you were like this tall. Remember when you were a kid? You had 2 cookies, and your sibling had none. Your friend had none. What did your mom do? She probably whispered to you and said, okay, honey, what I need you to do is eat both of those cookies as quickly as possible before your brother can rip that out of your greedy little hand, right? That's probably what mom said. No, she probably told you to. She told you to share. Parents, when your kid has 2 of something and their friend has none, you tell them to share. Jesus says this very same thing. Notice what he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 42. He says, give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Whenever you see someone with 2 of something, holding on and not sharing, there's just something that doesn't feel right. Right? You sense that. You may even want to speak out against it. But isn't it true that when someone has 2 of something and they share with the one who has none, it just makes you feel good all over? Imagine that you're God and you can see everyone on this planet. And you can see the people who have 2 and you can see the people who have none. What would you be compelled to do if you were God? You probably want to whisper to the person who has 2, just like, hey, you know what? You're going to be just fine with 1. And you're going to transform a life over here if you share with the one who doesn't have any. See, this is the remedy. The remedy to the greed that wants to creep into our heart is to share. It's to give. It's to live a life of generosity. So what I like to do with the rest of our time is I want to just give you 3 tips when it comes to this practice, when it comes to this rhythm of generosity, specifically giving time, giving energy, giving resources, giving your finances. All right, tip number 1. Tip number 1 is don't wait until you feel like giving to give. Don't wait. Now, there's all kinds of reasons why you may not feel like giving. There's plenty of reasons that I have that I don't necessarily feel like giving. It's like, well, I was planning on spending it over here. Now I got to give it? Oh, gee, you know. You may not feel like it because there's some fear. If you give over here, you may not have for the crisis that may eventually happen in life. And so there's these all kinds of reasons. But I would encourage you, don't wait. I'm going to speak some truth here that it's going to be harsh, okay? But it doesn't necessarily make it any less true. Now, what I'm going to share with you, we see it in Scripture. I think we even see it in the parable that we read. But here's what I want you to understand. If you are not willing to give to the point that it impacts your lifestyle, then according to Scripture, you're greedy. Here's the thing. If you're consuming to the point of having little or nothing left to give, greed's probably got a hold of your heart. If you are saving, if you are investing to the point that there is little or nothing to give, greed has a hold of your heart. Imagine that you're at the doctor's and the doctor's looking at your blood work or looking at all the different things that they've just tested you for, and the doctor kind of shakes their head and like, ooh, you need to start exercising. And I would say you need to start exercising at least twice a week. Now, at that point, will you be like, oh, wait, doctor, I know that exercising is important. But here's the thing. I'm going to wait until I'm in shape before I start exercising. Are you going to say that to your doctor? Yeah, I'm just going to wait till I get... No, what you know that actually working out is what gets you in shape. And the same is true when it comes to removing greed from your heart and your life. It's the remedy. Giving is the remedy to eliminate greed from your heart and your life. You don't just wait till you feel like it. And some of you may push back and you're like, okay, but I'm a student of Scripture, and I know somewhere it says that God loves a cheerful giver, and if I'm not giving cheerfully, then maybe I shouldn't do it. Hey, whether you're cheerful or not, God can use your money really well. Not only to bless other people, but also use your money to actually change and transform your heart. See, what I've noticed is that the giving actually is the action that leads to the feeling. Oftentimes not the other way around. And so give. even if you don't necessarily feel like giving. All right, tip number 2. Give to the point that it forces you to adjust your lifestyle. Here it is. It's going to be tough, but here it is. If you want to allow greed to feel the full force of this remedy, you have to give to the point where it actually forces your lifestyle to begin to change. How many of you, this is a show that was on years ago, ever watched the show The Fabulous Life? It was on VH1. You guys know what I'm talking about? The Fabulous Life. If you don't know that show, you are not missing a thing, okay? But I will at least explain it to you. They would follow they would basically look at celebrities and rich people, and they would just, show off all the different things that they're spending money on, the different houses that they own, the parties that they go to, all the different bling that they're sporting on their bodies, all those cool things. By the end of the show, you're like, oh my goodness, what a fabulous life. I can't believe they get to live like that. That's amazing. But at some point in the show, every single time, there was always a moment where the voiceover guy would say something to this effect. Well, if you think they know how to party in Paris, you're going to be blown away by how they spend their money on charity. And then it would go on this list of things that they're giving to charity. And you always walk away like, well, good for them. Like, they're not just spending it on themselves, they're giving it away. But in most cases, if you paid attention to the percentages, they would have these big numbers, like they gave $10,000 to this charity helping puppies figure out how they can deal with their stress because they lost their ball. Whatever it is that they're giving charity to. And it was always this big number, like $10,000, but then when you compared it to the millions upon millions of dollars they're spending on themselves, it's like it was a fraction of a percentage, right? It's just a fraction. And you're like, is it really? Are they really being generous? Again, if you want to make sure that greed feels the full force of this remedy of giving, you have to give to the point where it actually affects your lifestyle. And one of the best ways to do this is something called percentage giving. Maybe you've been brought up in the church, and so you're like, I think I know what that is, percentage giving. Some of you are like, I don't know what that is. So let me tell you what percentage giving is. It's when you decide ahead of time that whatever comes your way, whatever blessing, whatever harvest comes your way, you are going to give a specific percentage away. Even before it comes, you're going to say, I'm going to give this percentage away. And what's really interesting is, if you look at the early church, one of the things that they did is they were so transformed by what Jesus had done in their life, and they were so convicted by the calling that Jesus had, go and make disciples of all the nations, that what they did was they gave, and they gave generously to the work of the gospel. They gave, and they gave generously to those in need. This was a part of their rhythm and part of their practice. So here's the thing. I'm going to throw this out there to you Christians, and I know that's the majority here, but if you're not a follower of Christ, you can just ignore this part. If you are a Christian, and you recognize all that Christ has done in your life, and you are recognizing that the church is the body of Christ, the hope of the world, I would challenge you to percentage give to the work of the gospel. Now, that's just my little, preacher, hey, are you being, like that weird guy that, he's asking you to give, and it's really self-serving? I'm just saying this is what the early church did. And I would encourage you to do the same. But here's the thing. You might just be freaked out about this whole idea of percentage giving. So let me challenge you again. Start small. Start really small. If it scares you that maybe if I start giving this away, maybe I'm not going to have enough for myself, start small. Give 2%. Whatever comes in, just say, okay, I'm going to give 2% away to whatever it is that God has put on my heart to give, whether it's the church or some other organization. I'm going to give 2% away. You know what you're going to find out? You won't even miss it. You won't. And so the challenge would be then, next year, after you have given 2% away for an entire year, bump it up to 3%. So next year, you'll give 3% away. And then the following year, give 4% away. And I would encourage you to continue to do this year after year until you have hit at least a minimum of 10 to 12%. Why? Minimum. Why is that? Because it's only when you get to that percentage that is actually evidence of a lifestyle adjustment. And that's the evidence of, hey, you know what? I'm actually changing some things so that greed will never take its grip in my heart again. But it's not just percentage giving that I would encourage you to engage in. I would also encourage you to engage in the spontaneous giving that will come your way. To live with enough margin so that when a need enters your perspective, that you can see the need, you'll be able to help meet that need. So percentage giving and as well as spontaneous giving is a wonderful way so that greed will not have a grip in your heart. And again, one day you're just going to realize, hey, I'm going to lose it all anyway, right? Well, at least I'm saving up in God's kingdom. So we've got a couple of tips. Last tip is to give and to give responsibly. Give responsibly. A number of years ago, I got a phone call from a student, and wonderful kid. He had graduated high school just a few months ago, and he had a kind of a strained relationship with his father. It was one of those situations that as soon as he graduated, Dad did just a couple things for him, and then it was like, you're on your own. He made sure that he had a car, so he bought his son a car. He made sure that he was employed. He made sure that he had a room to rent, and then he said, okay, you're on your own, sink or swim, you're not coming back to the house type of thing. You're on your own. And so he had his car, and he had his job, and he had his little house and an apartment, and he was doing pretty well. And so imagine my surprise when I get a phone call, and this kid is like, I'm getting evicted. Like I don't have enough money for rent, and I don't even know where to stay. And then he goes in and it's like, I don't even have gas money. I don't have money for insurance next month to pay for the car. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have anything anymore. I was like, buddy, what happened? I don't know how to describe it other than to say he went on a generosity spree. Like, no kidding. He just started giving his money away. And it was one of those things that he would just go up to total strangers that may not even look like they need money. They didn't necessarily even ask for money. He's like, hey, here's $20. God bless you. Go up to somebody that he knew needed money. He's like, hey, here's $100. God bless you. And at some point, there was, if I remember right, he was in this large crowd of people, and he made it rain. You know what I'm talking about? I got a wad of cash, and he was just like, God bless you, everyone. You know, and he's like, he gave all his money away. Was he generous? Maybe. Was he responsible? If he was responsible, he wouldn't have ended up sleeping on my couch, right? That's what he needed to do. He needed to be responsible, but he ended up on my couch. Here's the thing. I want everybody to understand, it is not something that you should feel bad or guilty if you have money. Like, I don't want anyone to ever be like, oh man, I have so much money, I'm feeling really guilty. No, don't feel guilty. If you have little or you have much when it comes to money, don't feel bad or guilty about this. Why? Well, we touched on this a little bit last week. Because it's not yours, right? What do we know? We know eventually it will become someone else's. If you own a house, give it 50 years. You won't own your house. Someone else will own your house. Give it 80 years. You won't own whatever you value and find so amazing now. Someone else. You don't own it. What is it? It's a blessing that God has given you. This is one of the things we've learned about this parable. So if you don't actually own it, who is it from? Well, it's from God. So maybe this is another way to look at it. I have some investments, and I've got an individual, a guy who I work with, and he manages those investments. I don't want him to feel bad or guilty about managing those investments. You know what I want him to feel? I want him to feel responsible. I want him to feel very responsible for those investments. God is the same way. He's entrusted you. He's giving you these resources. How should you feel? You should feel responsible. Why? Because he owns it. It's not yours. He owns it. King David understood this. In 1 Chronicles, we see King David expressing this in chapter 29, verse 11. Notice what he says. He says, yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor. For everything, what is it? For everything in heaven and earth is mine? It's yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. It's all his anyway. So what do we need to do? We need to be responsible with the resources that we have. And so as you start to pray, as you start to ask those questions, why do I have so much? You start to pray and you say, Lord, what do you want me to do with my extra? Another way to look at this is if you ever go to a financial planner, if you've ever been with a financial planner, one of the first questions that those financial planners will ask you is, what are your goals? What are your goals? Why? Because they realize it's not theirs. What do we need to be talking to God about? We need to say, God, what are your goals? These are not my resources. Yes, I have an intelligent brain, but you are the one that gave me that so that I can do the work that I do. So, God, what are your goals? And I know God will eventually reveal what his goals are to you if you continue to seek and you continue to ask. And chances are you're going to realize how he shaped and created you, and you're going to start to realize, you know what, I've got a heart for homeless folks and to see them off the street. And so maybe a part of your story is going to be the spontaneous giving. You see someone in need, you see a homeless person, you may give spontaneously. But more likely than that, if you continue to seek the Lord, what the Lord is going to reveal to you is that you should you should give some percentage to a organization that has a proven track record in getting people off the streets. And this is where it gets difficult. And certainly as your pastor, I have not figured this out perfectly. But there are moments in time where people have come to me with a need. And I actually have the ability to meet that need. And I actually say, no, I'm not going to. Instead, what I do is I step in because I realize that it would be irresponsible for me to give that money to them because they will not use it responsibly. And so I actually have to step in and say, okay, first, let's go ahead and learn how we can be responsible so that when I give this to you, it will not be wasted because it's not actually mine anyway, and so I need to manage this well. And so is that a difficult conversation? Oh, yeah. And sometimes I don't even know if I've gotten it right. But I want to be responsible with what God has given me and entrusted to me. And so we give responsibility. So you're going to have to wrestle with this. For my wife and I, even before we were married, back living in San Jose, we made some decisions. One of those decisions was we're going to continue to do as a couple what we were doing as single folks. And that was percentage giving. And so when we became a couple and we were married, we gave, right off the top, whatever came in, 10% to the church. And we continue to give 10% to the church every single month. Why? Because again, we recognize that the church is the body of Christ, the hope of the world. And we want to be a part of bringing that hope to the entire world. And so we give 10% to the church. But it's not just 10% to the church. We also have missions organizations, multiple missions organizations and missionaries that we give monthly to. Because we love what they're doing. And we love being a part of that story. One of the things that we do is we actually give to help alleviate this crisis that our country finds itself in when it comes to the foster care situation. Every single year, there are multiple students who are living in Eswatini, Africa, kids that we help minister to when we did missions work over there. We pay for their schools so that they can get an education. And not only that, but we give spontaneously. When needs come and we recognize that we can meet that need, we give spontaneously. And I know, as I'm telling you this, some of you are like, that's it? That's it? And others of you are like, wow, that's a ton. I mean, you're giving a whole lot. I'm not telling you this so that you can judge me. Shame on you. Some of you are like, oh, that's nothing like me. I give so much more. But I'm also not telling you that so that you can think I'm really, really great. Because even with all that giving, sometimes I notice that greed's got a hold of my heart, and I got to be even more generous. Here's why I'm telling you that story. I'm telling it because Dana and I have never missed the money that we've given away. Not once in the almost 20 years that we have been married have we ever looked at each other like, oh man, I wish we hadn't given so much over here. Never. But we recognize and we know that if we weren't giving in that way, we would miss out on so many wonderful life-changing stories. We would miss out on the story of these kids who were living in poverty, but then they got this education and they were not only able to get a job, but they were actually able to get out of poverty. That's an amazing story to be a part of, right? We were a part of stories where the gospel message is given to people who did not know Jesus and their life had been completely transformed with the good news. And we get to celebrate with them one day in eternity because of the giving that God just said, manage, be responsible for. And so here's the challenge. The challenge for some of you, you have engaged in percentage giving, spontaneous giving for a long, long time. And you're like, yeah, and I don't really think that greed has a hold of my heart. Fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing. But here's a challenge for you. Share your testimony. Share your testimony. And when I say your testimony, I'm meaning let's not share this in a way that just brings you praise, but actually brings God honor. And this is how that might look. It might look like this. Hey, you know what? I don't know if you know about this organization, but they're doing this, this, and that. And my goodness, God is doing a work in this organization. And fill in the blank here, it is such a blessing to be able to give to whatever organization it is. What are you doing there? Not only are you bringing glory to God, but you're also encouraging other people to realize that giving, being generous, is a beautiful way to live your life. Second challenge, some of you are not there. And you're thinking, oh man, I don't. Start small. Start with the 2%. Start with some of that spontaneous giving. This week, start it. Don't wait till you feel like it. Engage it. Otherwise, greed will continue to distort how you view and how you see things and people, and you'll actually think it's all for you. And it's not. It's not. And one day, if you continue to live out these practices, one day, you're going to get a windfall of cash. Didn't expect it, didn't earn it, didn't deserve it. You're going to get a windfall of time. You're going to get a windfall of resources. And the first thing that you are going to think is, who do I get to bless with this? And at that point, you will know that greed no longer has a space in your heart. Let's pray. Father God, we just want to say thank you for being that God who blesses and continues to give good, beautiful gifts. Father, some of us, we look back at what we used to have, and it was so meager, but we were so happy. And Father, some of us, we've gained, and maybe some of the happiness isn't there because we're holding on so tightly and we're so fearful of what we might lose. Father, I pray that you would reveal the greed that is in each of our hearts. And Father, I pray that we would surrender that to you today, that we would begin to give and to give generously. Thank you for being a God who has done that, practiced it, lived it out, is our model. May we now do it as well. I pray this in your Son's name.